actually had C.diff. Then I started a whole other regimen of antibiotics for months. That didn't work. So I felt helpless, hopeless. And I started doing my own research online and found there was something called FMT. So I went back to the same doctor and asked him about it. And he said he had heard of it, but it's not in their practice to perform that. At the time, this was FMT through colonoscopy. So I started looking online and found that novel Biome, where you are, sold oral capsules. I had done research and found out that the oral FMT basically has almost the exact same efficacy and not as intrusive. I don't have to be put under, I don't have to go through what I went through the first time. So I ordered the pills. And within 48 hours, I had my first normal bowel movement, which was amazing because it took me longer even with the colonoscopy because there was really nothing in you. You had to wait longer to even have a normal bowel movement. I was amazed.
Hi, Beth. I'm really excited for you to kind of share your story today. I think it'll be super useful for people to kind of hear how your journey through FMT and with C.diff, and what were some of the core symptoms and struggles that you experienced before FMT?
Sure. Well, originally, I did not know that I had C.diff. This was back in 2017 was my first occurrence. I had been misdiagnosed for about 6 months. So you can imagine that the symptomatology it got so exacerbated. I was originally diagnosed with food poisoning, went to the ER, was put on medication, antibiotics, which actually helped because when I found out later, when you have C.diff and you take an antibiotic, it actually suppresses it. So I felt better. But then a few days after I finished the regimen, it came back again. So I go back to the same ER and was given more antibiotic, thinking that the food poisoning or whatever was in me had not been eradicated. So same thing, that did not seem to work. And then I was referred to a gastroenterologist, a specialist. So I was diagnosed with some different things, IBS, Crohn's disease, and things just didn't make sense. Continued to have bowel movements, diarrhea, 20 to 25 times a day, fever and chills, extreme weight loss, nausea all the time, dehydration. And it was hard for me to believe that suddenly in my, at the time, early to mid 40s, that I had IBS or Crohn's because I could eat, drink, anything. And then to be told I might have food intolerances or Crohn's, which usually develops earlier in life than later, it just didn't make sense. So I finally went to see a doctor at UT Health Science Center who's a researcher, and that's who discovered that I actually had C.diff. However, then I started a whole other regimen of antibiotics for months. Took a course, I think, of 3 or 4 weeks of something called Flagyl. That didn't work. And then it became vancomycin. That didn't work. And then Difficid, and that didn't work. So I felt helpless, hopeless. And I started doing my own research online and found there was something called FMT. So I went back to the same doctor and asked him about it. And he said he had heard of it, but it's not in their practice to perform that. At the time, this was FMT through colonoscopy that I was inquiring about. I didn't even know there was oral FMT, anything else out there. So after my due diligence, I finally found a doctor in this region at the time that would actually perform FMT via colonoscopy. Fast forward, and I felt great. Fast forward to last year, 2021, I had developed strep throat. Went to a local clinic where they prescribed me 2 different types of antibiotics. Initially, it was just one, but the symptoms weren't going away. So he prescribed me an additional antibiotic. I knew with my history, I had some concerns. I spoke to him about it, and he didn't think that at that dosage or those prescriptions had more of a moderate risk versus high risk of developing C. diff again. However, within a few days after completion of antibiotics, I knew I had C. diff again. The horrible thing about this was it was in the during the time of COVID, where everything was locked down. You didn't have access to hospitals, which was where, at least here, that you have to go get an FMT via colonoscopy. Called the doctor. He said he can't do it. I didn't know what to do. So I started looking online and found that novel Biome, where you are, sold oral capsules, and that I did find a few other places here in the States where I am, but they are, the way they're shipped, it's not partially freeze dried like yours, and I have to have a special freezer type of unit for those, and it just seemed overly complicated. So I went ahead and ordered the oral. I had done research and found out that the oral FMT basically has almost the exact same efficacy and not as intrusive. I don't have to be put under. I don't have to go through what I went through the first time. So I ordered the pills. Took it in 2 doses. The first day, I think 18 pills. The second day, 17. And then within 48 hours, within 24 hours, the diarrhea had ceased. And within 48 hours, I had my first normal bowel movement, which was amazing, because it took me longer, even with the colonoscopy, because there was really nothing in you. You had to wait longer to even have a normal bowel movement. I was amazed. The pills, I was worried because they looked kind of big, and I'm not good at swallowing large pills. But I was surprised with how easy they actually went down, and it was well worth it. So I felt better. It was great. Sadly, last month, I was diagnosed again, so 2 years in a row. So now I've had three occurrences in 5 years, which is very disconcerting. Ordered the pills again from you, Novel Biome, and again, within 48 hours, I was having normal bowel movements. It literally, Novel Biome literally has saved my life. The access to getting these type of pills from you, I don't know what I would have done, because again, the partially freeze-dried, I guess, methodology of being able to store them, contain them, ship them all the way to Texas from Canada. And here it's 107 degrees literally this week. So it's amazing to me. I question the efficacy of the pills because of the heat and shipment, but so far everything has worked perfectly. It's sad to think that I will probably be a lifelong customer and consumer of yours, but that is a fact, because there's no way, foreseeable way, that I can go without taking antibiotics for the rest of my life. Even when you try to mitigate them, this third time that I actually had C. diff was because I got H. pylori. So I spoke to my gastroenterologist in depth about it, cost benefit analysis. Should I not treat the H. pylori, but I was already having symptoms from the H. pylori, peptic ulcers, gastritis. So, in order to treat those, I needed to treat the H. pylori. Again, those antibiotics were like a moderate risk for C. diff, but again, I got it. So really, you can't avoid taking antibiotics, but with the oral FMT pills, or probably any FMT, and the availability through novel Biome, I have been able to at least have my life saved when I do get C. diff. I'm very fearful of death. I really feel that my life has been saved over and over again by you, by your organization. And it's scary. It's scary when you're going through it. But I'm very grateful. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I'm in 2 weeks since I took them this third time, and feeling great. I know there's a 10 to 12 week window where I could have recurrence. And I have another bottle in my freezer just in case, but I don't foresee having a recurrence in the window in that time frame, because I didn't the last time. So I feel very positive. I've gained weight back. I feel healthier again. So it's a good feeling.
Yeah. And it's such an impressive story, because you're still very positive about everything. And it's been a really tough journey. When you were starting kind of looking in and doing your research on FMT, what were the things you were kind of afraid of, skeptical of, and then kind of how has that changed now that you've been through the process?
You would think in my field, I'm a lawyer, that I would be skeptical of this. And I'm skeptical of a lot of things. I question a lot of things. But the data was there, the science was there, and I wasn't just reading at all what I found on, let's say, a site like Novel Biome, where you can post pretty much anything. I was looking at studies, National Institute of Health, pilot programs, to see really objectively what the research outcomes were, and they were so positive. I would say with the pills, my skepticism is that the best route to get the microbiota into my gut? And then after researching more, I found out that it actually can be even better at times, depending on, for C. diff, where it is. So if it sits in the colon versus more in the intestine. I really didn't have skepticism. Now, the partially freeze-dried, about the oral pills, I was a little skeptical about, but the results are there. I can't argue the results. And I had never heard of that technology. I hadn't read about it. All the oral FMT pills that I could find online, at least here in the United States, had to be kept at a very low special medical freezer. So this allowed me to not only take them at home, but to have them here, and could take them in the privacy of my own home, which meant a lot to me. But no, the research is out there. For me, I do a lot of research, and it was conclusive. So it is. Not a lot of skepticism.
Yeah. And it's impressive now that there's more kind of these comparative studies have come out over, the last couple of years. It's quite new, but looking at kind of comparing kind of the gold standard, especially in the US, using colonoscopy directly to what you're seeing with kind of these freeze-dried and kind of oral capsules. And it looks exactly the same or sometimes better. And I think when you're really sick and you're having, kind of large number of bowel movements a day, you really don't want to leave your house until you feel better. And I think that access is really important, because it gives you some kind of comfort in a really uncomfortable state.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So are there any other challenges you think you overcame kind of that pre and during and post FMT? I guess for you, you've had reoccurrences. But what kind of things, I guess, did you kind of feel like you faced while going through the process? Or do you feel like it was pretty smooth? Or once you kind of found access to it, it became kind of an easier process?
No, every time you get C. diff, at least from the research I've read, it can be harder and harder to eradicate because apparently C. diff, this spore, is a smart parasite. I guess a lot of parasites or bugs now that live in our intestinal tract are getting smarter and smarter. So that was a big concern to me. Also, I will always have the concern about accessibility. Will I be able to get FMT in any type of form years to come? Will organizations like yours who provide FMT get the backing that you need in order to keep fostering your programs? That's a huge concern to me. That is always honestly in the back of my head, is accessibility. And there is nothing, literally, and I've done a lot of research, anyone can do it. There is nothing with the same level of efficacy for treating C. diff as FMT. Nothing. So my concern going forward will always be accessibility.
I hope that as more people tell their stories and more research comes out, it becomes easier to access because it does work. And I don't think, you should have to go through all these courses of antibiotics every time before you're allowed to access something works. It's a hard struggle. And I think, people are doing the research, and I hope that at some point it becomes something that's accessible and people know more about. So there are less people, going through the stages you went to, struggling when there could have been something you were given at the beginning that could have helped, and maybe not allowed it to kind of keep, festering in your gut and getting stronger the first time round, so that it's, you become more susceptible over time.
Well, one thing I'm very skeptical about is, most people, or perhaps all people that don't get C. diff acquired in a hospital setting, do get it through antibiotics. So it's interesting to me that in the medical field, that the treatment of C. diff is to use more antibiotics. So why not use something natural? In fact, the last 2 times, last year and this year, when I had C. diff again, I was adamant about no antibiotics. We're going straight to FMT. There's no reason for it.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
And is there anything else you kind of want to share about anyone that's considering FMT for C. diff? And if they're looking at novel biome, I guess, what would you want to share with them?
Sure. I mean, hands down, FMT is the way to go. I don't think treating C. diff, especially if it's antibiotic induced with more antibiotics, makes sense. The research is out there, and it's supported by different organizations and different research institutes and scientists. So that's there. I think that getting it from novel biome, again, I can only speak to oral FMT, but getting it, the accessibility. So again, I am in Texas, you are in Canada. One time it was shipped, and it was FedEx's fault, but it was 1 day late. The other 2 times I received it from you, it was next day. The fact that it can be partially freeze dried and still have efficacy, and ship all the way over here, is another reason, especially for people who live all around the world and need access. That is a huge thing. is access and knowing that you can get it like this. I mean, obviously, if it's through colonoscopy or you have to have a special freezer for it. It doesn't work. The oral FMT like this is not feasible nor accessible for people all around the world. I mean, this is something that could really open the door for people all around the world in different countries that need that access.
Yeah. And the freeze drive it gives you more of a shelf stable product. And that's what you need when you need a medication and you are distance away. And I think that's something that I mean, there's been a lot of work done on our end to make sure that it'll stay the same. It has the same efficacy, but it can travel. And I think that's, I appreciate you kind of, highlighting that for people, because it's a newer form. And so there's a little less out there, but, expecting someone to have a medical grade freezer at their house is it's just not going to happen. Those freezers aren't cheap, and, it's just not something people have. And so having a product that can come to your door is, I think, something we're really proud of.
Oh, you should be, because again, I haven't found any other company that has that. And again, not all doctors' offices have that. My doctor's office doesn't even have a medical grade freezer like that. And even if they did, then I have to go over there and take the pills. And again, it's nice to be able to do that in the privacy of your own home and feel comfortable and do it at your own time.